all relative, right or wrong.
Yep.
You understand? So it's very hard to quantify it. We don't know for sure, and it doesn't matter. Even if they claim that human beings have been here for how many years they try to calculate, it wouldn't cause a problem for us, basically. Because those terminologies, again, it's all relative to the occurrences and the place in which they occur. That's called zaman.
So we don't know exactly how many years since the human race was on Earth.
And we never attempted. I mean, well, some historians had tried to attempt some guess, right, about how many generations there were between, for instance, Nuh alayhi salam. But strictly speaking, not necessarily from time, because even then, what does the Quran say about the life of Nuh alayhi salam? How long did he live?
950 years. 900 plus years.
500.
He preached. Right?
500.
500, okay.
But still, doesn't matter whether it was 500 or 900. That's not an average lifespan of any person that I know of, at least, right? And even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that the average lifespan of his ummah will be 60 something. Average.
Okay.
So what is, again? It's all relative. It's all relative. But that's how they try to. So even then they don't really try to say how much time was in between Nuh alayhi salam, for instance, and Musa alayhi salam. It's more of how many children, if you will, the lineage, like how many children did he have, and understand how much time between it? Not really, but just from a lineage perspective. That's it. Talking about the Islamic historians, Ibn Athir and people like that, Ibn Khan and all these other historians. I don't think any of them actually tried to say there's a exact time.
Exact time. Okay.
The only scholar who tried to quantify an exact time for any occurrence in the dunya, whether it's life in the dunya or any other things that happen, the time span between Nuh alayhi salam and Musa alayhi salam, the only scholar that I know of, and again, there's a lot of information out there we're not privy to, but Alim as-Suyuti rahimahullah ta'ala, he tried to calculate based on the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Again, see, he's not giving exact times, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the length of this ummah, okay, if you will, like it's how long it will be, like how long the ummah will last, is like the length between Asr and Maghrib. So the whole hadith mentions that the length of time for Bani Israel was like between what? Fajr and Dhuhr.
Oh.
So out of all of the nations of the Anbiya, when we're talking about Ummah, we're not talking about nations of people. We're talking specifically about believers who had followed a prophet and a book, right? So out of all the Anbiya, a nation based or a tradition based on that Nabi's teaching and their book that they had been revealed to them, the longest length of time was for Bani Israel. So that's why the Rasulullah said between Fajr and Dhuhr. And even that is also, look at it, it's all relative. Fajr and Dhuhr, it also depends on what part of the globe you're in, right?
Yep.
So it's not an exact, like you sit there and quantify, like, okay, exactly how long. It's a point is that it was the longest, because between any two salat, the longest period of time is what? Fajr, Dhuhr. Then he said that the Nasara, the Christians, will actually be between Dhuhr and Asr. And then Rasulullah said that this ummah will be like between the time of Asr and Maghrib, which technically is the shortest between any two salats, which is also some of the Hanafi fuqaha, they pray Asr a little bit later. That's also their proof. Because the shortest time between two salats is what? Asr and Maghrib. This is what the hadith is saying. It should be the shortest, at most maybe an hour and 30 minutes between Asr and Maghrib. Now, based on that, the only scholar I know who tried to quantify it was basically, like I said, Alamat al-Suyuti. He kind of put it to about 1,500 years, which makes it basically like very close to our generation is like the end, the tail end of the ummah and of the world, meaning because he's trying to say, because we're the last ummah, that means that after us there's nothing but what? The Sa'ah, the last days. So he's, in his mind, that was his calculation, that okay, that means round about the times we're living in, meaning a decade only from our current time, about 2030 was his rough equivalent of when everything's going to just come to an end.
Didn't the Sahaba think the Qiyamah was very eminent? And the same with the apostles of Hazrat Isa.
Of course. Because they understood the same principle that I mentioned before. Time is relative. There's another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in the Mustadrak of Imam Hakim that where Rasulullah ﷺ said that even if there was only one day left of the dunya and Imam Mahdi and all the major signs of Qiyamah have not occurred, then Allah Ta'ala yatawwala, yani He will make that one day last long enough for all of these things to occur. So what did I say about time according to the theologians? It's occurrences that happen in a particular place. To quantify it then would become what? Kind of foolish, because it's all relative. If Allah so wills, He will make that one day last so long. Not 24 hours, it doesn't have to be that way. It's relative to what will occur in that period. You understand? So it could be that one day is just extended for such a period of time that we can't calculate, that Allah Ta'ala will allow all these things to happen. But it also shows, again, that it's all relative. That's why we always say we don't, as much as Alamat al-Suyuti was a great scholar, and that's a very ingenious thing to do, is try and calculate and see how long, right, Asr to Maghrib, what is the implication here? But at the end of the day, we'll say it's all relative, so that means what? Like the Sahaba, it could occur tomorrow. That's how the Sahaba thought. But if Allah so wills, this can all happen tomorrow. That's why there's these hadith about Ibn Sayyad. He was a person that lived in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. It's in Sahih Muslim. There's quite a few hadith that the Sahaba thought for a second, even to the extent that even Rasulullah ﷺ for a brief moment thought that this might be Dajjal. In his lifetime. Even though he knows that he's given information through Wahy, obviously, that certain things will occur before Dajjal, but again, it's all relative. If Allah so wills, He can make it happen right now. Just as if Allah so wills, He can allow us to last another 1,000 years before it happens. That's all up to Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. So time is always relative in regards to the events that will occur, because that's, again, the definition of time. As I said, how do they define it? The occurrences, the events, the things that happen in a particular realm, if you would put it that way. So it's relative to what happens and where it happens. You can't always quantify it. It's the bottom line. And when you quantify it like that, sometimes what happens is when we try to, if you will, impose our own understanding of things upon Allah, usually Allah does the opposite. Meaning by that, like for instance, I was just talking about this with Mikhail, like sometimes if we have certain attitudes even, the Battle of Hunayn, the Sahaba had such a large group of people, they thought that victory is imminent. What did Allah do? إِذْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ كَثْرَتُكُمْ. When you were so impressed about your numbers and your strength, and Allah allowed you to do what? Taste defeat. Because Muslims now, we're so much, unfortunately, we're so immersed in like inferiority complexes. We're looking for any reason to feel happy about victories, to the point that we'll, and I personally like, unfortunately, things like MMA, like Khabib, which technically, really from a Sharia point of view, how halal really can MMA be? It's actually not too halal, to be honest with you. You can't hit another human being in the face unless you're actually in physical danger. There's no permission for it. You can't make a living off of it. You understand what I'm saying? But we love it so much, right? Because we're so used to being disgraced, unfortunately, that any time a Muslim does anything like that, we're like, yay. But what's the problem with that? He will lose one day. You understand? Inevitably, one day he's going to be beat. He's not going to win all the time. It's not going to happen. So what's going to happen to you now? That when he loses, what's going to happen? Everyone's going to lose, like, oh, our hero is done. Whereas the Sahaba, subhanAllah, look at that. Allah just taught them a simple lesson. Once your attitude was that we cannot lose, then Allah Ta'ala will do the exact opposite, okay? Just because you think that way, I'm going to do the opposite to teach you a lesson. You can lose. And that's why actually the greatest victory for the Sahaba, actually, that's why no person in the dunya would ever be able to understand that, is the greatest victory for the Sahaba was Shahada. How can you explain that to someone? Victory for me is death. No sane, if you're just using regular logic, no sane human being would say that. Like, yeah, that's great, you died. You succeeded. That's why they think we're insane. Like, no sane person does that. Like, by dying in the path of Allah, I've succeeded. Like, who would ever say something like that? It makes no sense. Like, how does that? You didn't win. You got killed even. You weren't even just defeated. You were killed. But for them, that was victory. So it shows you that, their attitude was different. It was a totally different worldview that they had. For us, it's like, we want to win all the time. Perhaps that's the reason why Allah allows us to lose all the time. You have to have the opposite. So these things too, when you quantify things, when people try to say like, yeah, Dajjal is right around the corner, or Mahdi is already alive, that's none of your business. And perhaps sometimes when you make these assumptions, Allah will do the exact opposite just to teach you a lesson. Like, this is not your affair. When and where it's time, I will allow these things to happen. I will make these things to happen. Your concern is not that. Just like the hadith I quoted from Abdullah ibn Salam, I think here in this gathering, or maybe another gathering, that the Prophet ﷺ told us that even if you hear Dajjal is coming and you're planting a tree, continue to plant your tree. And what is planting a tree? Is that some monumental religious work that you're doing there? It's a very mundane thing to do, planting a tree. So in other words, what is he trying to tell us? That even something mundane like that you're trying to do, you should continue to do. Why? Because there will still be people living after Dajjal. And perhaps the tree that you planted will still benefit those people. So you don't stop life and what you're doing just because these things are going to happen, and especially not when you're calculating it. And another indication of that, like Allah does things not because we're ready for it or because we're calculating it. He does it when He wants to, is that even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the hour, the sa'ah will not come. He said any time that the hour is mentioned, He says, baghtatan. You know what that means? Suddenly, unexpectedly. Meaning, even Dajjal, the Prophet said, will occur, he will come in the ummah when no one will remember him. Not when you're ready. You understand, when everyone's still thinking about it and preparing, calculation is going to happen in this year, 10 years from now, it's going to happen. It doesn't. It happens when nobody's thinking about it and nobody's expecting it. The sa'a will come baghtatan. It's when you're not ready. It's not on your assumptions. It's when Allah knows, and Allah's knowledge, it cannot be circumvented. It cannot be, avoided. That's when it'll happen. Baghtatan. Suddenly and quickly and swiftly. And that's also because it's a test also. The name of the game of a test. When you really want to test someone, when do you do it? When they train people in armies for like combat effectiveness, what do? Random drills, right? Let's see if they can stand on their feet and fight when they're not expecting it. That's when we know they're really ready. That they've been trained properly. When we give it to them when they're not expecting it, they're ready to react properly. That's a true test. Baghtatan. Because you're already ready for it. The preppers, you know those guys? You know what preppers are, right? You've never heard of preppers before? There's like a subculture in America now that's growing because, everyone's expecting Armageddon and the end of Western culture in America, and, so there's people called preppers who literally, the word comes preparation, obviously. So they spend, I'm not even joking, just look this stuff up. You can see interviews. They build like bomb shelters below in their basements, like they calculate how many years worth of dry foods and canned goods they need to survive in Armageddon. They stock up weapons and enough, literally like calculate how many bullets do I need to survive if America falls on its face and the Armageddon comes. And they're called preppers. How do I, have my own water source? How many miles? These people are so serious about it. They even have, apparently there's a gas tank that you can add to if you have a truck, not a regular car, but if you have a truck, you can actually put it in the bed of your truck that will give you enough gas to drive for like hundreds of miles without stopping. Even after your engine, they literally have invented, it's a real thing, that you have this gas tank that goes to your engine, that if, again, in their mind, if everything goes wrong, I can drive hundreds of miles straight with this gas. And there's people like that, they're called preppers. So you know what I mean? People really get serious about these things, but the idea is, Allah Ta'ala, when He brings His tests, when He brings these trials, they don't happen when people are like, in a bomb shelter with a big tank of gas ready for everything, like years worth of food and ammunition, and anything that happens we're ready for. Allah Ta'ala brings it in such a way that we're all, and that's because the only people who pass such tests are whom? الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Mean people of patience, people of fortitude, people who, come what may, will be patient and will hold our, our 2 feet on the ground and not get concerned about it. Anyhow, there's a lot about Surah Hashr, look at that too. From where they never expected, because that was about the Yahud of Khaybar. Khaybar had the best forts in all of Arabia. So they, again, preppers, they were prepared for what? Anything. Anyone who tries to invade us, anyone who tries to fight us, they will never win, because we are the most heavily defended, well-fortified people in all of Arabia. And then what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? Destruction came to them from places they would never expect it. In other words, they prepared and they thought they were ready, but then Allah ta'ala brought it to them in such a way that they couldn't stop it. Allah ta'ala make it easy for us. Okay, so should we start? Okay. Bismillah, a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. So I will start at ayah number 47, inshallah. قالت ربي أن يكون لي ولد ولم يمسسني بشر قال كذلك الله يخلق ما يشاء إذا قضى أمرا فإنما يقول له كن فيكون. So returning to this story of Maryam, radiallahu ta'ala anha. So the reference, of course, it starts there with her, that she said that, "Oh Allah, oh my Rabb, how will this be? How will I have a child if no man has ever touched me?" Okay. The word here, anna yakunu li, some ulama have translated as min ayna li, which in Arabic is like, it's not a, we dealt with this earlier, it's not that she had any doubt in what Allah can do, but she wanted to know more of how it would happen. So when you say min ayna li, and it's like saying, from where will this happen? If I'm not married and I don't have a husband, then how will this happen? Not can it happen. 2 different things. Okay, so it's not ta'ajjub in the sense that I can't believe it, or it's not something that I can comprehend. It's more of a, how will this go down? How will this happen? If I'm not married and that's a normal means of procreation, then how will the child be born to me if that's not my case? Okay? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells her, well, that this, just like that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates what He wants. So what would that mean? That when Allah creates, the idea of khalq, of creation, is to be able to bring something into existence without there ever being any previous type of, what word should I use here? Like a prototype, or even any means. That out of nothing, out of non-existence, pure non-existence, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do what? Bring something into existence. So because of that, there should be no surprise or question. I shouldn't say surprise again, it's not ta'ajjub, but there should be no question of how it will happen. Because why? Allah Ta'ala can create as He did before from non-existence. So when Allah creates from non-existence, when He wills, okay? Ma yasha, when He wills, if He brings something out of non-existence, then it is nothing for Him also to give you a child without a father. It's not a big deal. It's not something that you need to know how, but all you need to know is when Allah wants something, as it says after إِذَا قَضَى أَمْرًا, when Allah has decided something will happen, then there is nothing more that's needed except for what? فَإِنَّمَا يَقُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُن. That simply Allah says be, and it is. So kun refers to the creative powers, the creativity of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. It's called takween according to some theologians. That when Allah wants something to happen, there is no necessity of there having to be any type of sequence or even means to make that thing happen. Allah again can bring things out of total and complete non-existence into existence.
You had mentioned that this is not doubt, but isn't this kind of a common thing, kind of the incredulous human nature of a first interaction, or something like the Prophet's first interaction with Hazrat Jibreel?
Right.
I mean, maybe you wouldn't categorize that as doubt, but he couldn't
He didn't understand completely yet what's going on.
Which is a very human emotion, right?
Obviously. So in this case too, you have to remember that she's being raised in a family of prophethood, like Zakaria alayhi salam. And even if it wasn't for that, she's still a believer. So all the believers throughout every generation and every ummah had basic tawheed and aqidah. And basic tawheed and aqidah tells all of us as believers that the sole creator and proprietor of everything that happens is whom? It's Allah. So she already understood that. She had no doubt about that. But because it's so abnormal what was being said to her, is more of like, the question is not if it can happen, the question is how will it happen? Again, min ayna, and min ayna li hada, like how exactly is this going to happen? Just like Zakaria alayhi salam, and this is why the ayah came before this. It's like a very similar situation with a different circumstance. When Zakaria alayhi salam saw that Maryam radiallahu ta'ala anha had food from nowhere, what was his question? The same thing, the same words almost. Anna yakunu li? She's saying Anna yakunu li, and he said Anna laki hada. In Arabic, it's even two almost the same words, It wasn't that it can't happen and Allah cannot do it. It's more like how. You see, it's that human curiosity that you want to uncover. Like, well, how did this happen? And then Allah reminded all of us. And the funny thing is that this is almost like, it's not a rebuke, but it's almost like Allah is telling all of them. Look at the words. Maryam is asking the same questions, right? How would this happen? She's given the response of what? كَذَلِكَ اللَّهُ يَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ. Just like that, Allah will create whatever He wants. Now, recall the same incident before. I'm talking about Zakaria, when he said the same question about the food that she was getting from nowhere. أَنَّ لَكِ هَذَا. What did she say? هُوَ مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَرْزُقُ مَن يَشَاءُ. The same, in other words, her response was the same response Allah gave to her. It's a lesson for all of us, and her too included. In other words, they're not doubtful people, but everyone can rise and go up a level in yaqeen, in certainty. So she's reminded by Allah with the same words that she used to remind Zakaria. You see what I'm saying? That just like that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides from wherever He wants. In other words, without any means. Just like Allah can create out of absolute non-existence. Why is it a big deal for you that Allah can give me food? You see what I'm saying? But then she's reminded the exact same thing in her circumstance. Don't worry about how you're going to get a child, just like you told Zakaria alayhi salam that you're going to get, Allah's the one who provides, so how is this a question even of how? Then I'm reminding you too, Ya Maryam. There's no how. Allah, when He wants something to happen, إِذَا قَضَى أَمْرًا, when Allah has decided something will happen, then He simply says to it, فَإِنَّمَا يَقُولُ كُنْ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُنْ. See what I'm saying? It's not like a doubt. It's more of just being surprised that something's happening that's abnormal, but in that they are always reminded of something that you already know. And it's kind of like this. This is the difference between knowing something and then having the experience of it and seeing it, as they say, you have ilmul yaqeen, and then what? Ainul yaqeen, haqqul yaqeen. You know something, then you see it happening, and then after that you are certain of it, and so they are obviously, as Anbiya and as believers, they already knew Allah is the creator of everything that happens, and He controls everything. But now they're seeing it happen, and when they see it, happening, and they experience it happening, it's just another level of yaqeen. So that we can say Anbiya definitely, they can grow in terms of what you call yaqeen, certainty. Okay, in fact, it'll grow continuously even after death and so forth and so on. That's why the Rasulullah said on the Day of Judgment, when he will be given the shafa'ah, he said, I will be inspired with words that I have never been inspired with before, to praise Allah Azza wa Jal. What is that indicative of? That even after death, even there at that point, he's still being inspired with names and ways to extol and praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that Allah ta'ala has no limit. So can the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and your yaqeen on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can it have a limit? No. So you see what I'm saying? Anbiya can be raised in that darajah. Like it's, the names and the knowledge of Allah and His names and attributes can continue. But it's not that they had the doubt in what Allah, the basic necessary beliefs or your i'tiqad of who Allah is, that was never in question from them. It was only just like kind of, again, at that time, even if you believe it, even if you know it's true, but then when you see it, it actually becomes a shock to you, right? You understand what I'm saying? So something can be conceptually sound. So you know intellectually that that's the fact, right? This can happen. Like I can fall out of an airplane and bounce off the ground and walk away, which has happened, by the way. Conceptually, I can say, yeah, that happened. But when you see it, even though you know it's true, what would happen to you? Would you not be still a little shocked and then say afterwards, well, how exactly did that, Yeah, I know conceptually this can happen, but now it just happened in front of me. Now this is different. Seeing is believing, and especially something that incredible, supernatural, if you will, even. You're going to have a natural human reaction as okay, I want to understand this a little more. Does it make sense? So it's not a doubt at all about Allah, His attributes, or His basic aqidah of who Allah is. It's more of just when it happens to them, they are obviously at first a little bit taken back just because it's not normal. And then they are reminded, and in the case of Maryam, like I said, she's reminded, almost, it's very, I don't want to say amusingly, but the same thing that she said to Zakaria alayhi salam was basically said to her. Don't get worried about it, because just as you said to him, Allah provides to whom He wills. Ma yasha. Here too Allah is reminding her with the same words. Yakhluqu ma yasha. He creates what He wants. So then, after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَالتَّوْرَاةَ وَالْإِنْجِيلَ, that He will teach this child of yours, Isa alayhi salam, the book. It's interesting that a lot of the exegetes and mufassirun of the Quran say that this actually refers to handwriting, khat. That he will be an expert in writing and handwriting, and both his, not just writing in terms of being able to write, but his handwriting as well, his khat, I don't want to say calligraphy, but his handwriting skills, his penmanship will also be expert. That's one explanation, actually, a very common explanation by many of the ulama, that this means literally khat, that his penmanship, he will be taught by Allah directly. Okay? Of course, the other explanation would be what? Al-Kitab here referring to divine revelation. And there's no reason why we can't say both are intended here. That Allah Ta'ala will teach him both the ability to write well and have the skills of good penmanship, and also Allah Ta'ala will teach him the wisdoms and the commandments of the previous books. Not a problem, right? Is there anything conflicting there? No.
It's just that Torah and Injil are already referred in the same ayah. Separately.
Right. And that's why some ulama say that this must be what? Something different. Why would he single out? So al-kitab for some, kitabah, which is literally to write. The skills of writing and penmanship. Then after that, hikmah. Hikmah is repeated also in other ayat. If you know certain ayat that refer to the Prophet ﷺ, that he does certain things, and one of them is what? وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ, that he teaches people the book, same thing, which lends the tafsir of the other divine revelation, because in this case that's what was taught to the Prophet. The Prophet ﷺ, by the divine wisdom of Allah, was always ummi. Even though it's interesting, there are some hadith where he would correct certain Sahaba about their writing certain letters. And even, recently, this is a side note, but recently I read some of the ulama made a reference to the Prophet ﷺ. Some say that there may be indication that he actually understood and knew all languages. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He is sent to whom? Kafatan linnas, to all people. Right? And then Allah says in another ayat, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ. We never send any prophet except that prophet will speak the tongue of his people. So if he's a prophet to all mankind, so there may be reference here that he had an understanding of and knew all languages. And that's not beyond Allah, because again, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. He taught Adam alayhi salam the names of all things. And also there's other hadith too where actually he spoke some Farsi with Salman al-Farsi, which he never learned Farsi formally. You understand what I'm saying? Like he actually had a few sentences with him in certain occasions in Farsi. So some ulama are of that opinion, that the Prophet had that ability, but he was kept ummi. So what would ummi mean then? You know how some people translate ummi as being illiterate? Ummi would mean here, I think a better way of translating it, Allah knows best, is never formally educated. See the difference, right? Illiterate would indicate that he had no knowledge of language or how to use language or even how to write. There's strong indications, like in these hadith, like I said, that's not the case. Then what would it mean? It means that he was never formally educated. That all of his knowledge was because of direct access to wahi. Wallahu a'lam. Okay? So even here, it would be almost similar, but hikmah is the same word that's used in the ayat for Isa alayhi salam in this case and for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in another case. What is hikmah? Like if I asked you what it is, how would you translate it?
Wisdom.
Wisdom, that's how everybody translates it. Hikmah means what? Wisdom. Okay, fine. Where does the word come from? Hikmah comes from hukm. Hakama yahkumu in Arabic. Kayfa tahkumun. And there, hukm means usually, as you would translate it, what? To judge. Right? The hakim is a judge. So, hukm and hikmah are related. That's why also many times people misuse hikmah. Like sometimes if you get upset, people may tell you calm down, use hikmah. You heard that before, right? You get upset and someone says, calm down, use hikmah. The funny thing is that if you're using hikmah, sometimes hikmah demands that you have to be angry too. Because hikmah comes from hukm. Hukm is to give a proper ruling or judgment in relation to anything. In relation to what? Anything. And sometimes in certain circumstances, the proper reaction is to do what? Is to be upset. So it's misused. Like wisdom means at all times, in all places, I have to accept everything and everyone and I should never be upset. That's not hikmah. Actually the opposite. Hikmah demands, that's what you would call rafa, or ra'uf, or al-afu. You understand? Al-afu. When you don't get mad or upset at people or give them what they might have deserved through their actions. That's different. Hikmah sometimes does require that a person is what? Stern or upset. Otherwise, a hakim, a judge who does not get upset, what kind of judge would that be? Right? If you have a judge who never gets upset and is never able to punish people, is that a good judge, if you would put it that way? Do they make proper rulings and decisions? No. So hikmah is not to be, that's not wisdom to just say, okay, everything's okay, and do what you want, say what you want, I'll never get riled up, I'll never be upset about anything. Hikmah actually means to put things in their proper order. And even linguistically, if you could go back even further, the word hukm actually means mana. It means to prevent. That's why the hakim is the hakim, because the judge prevents people from doing what? Oppressing other people. You understand? From abusing other people or from taking other people's rights. So the word hukm is also related to that, mana. So what would hikmah actually mean here? That he was taught the ability to be able to make proper conclusions and proper decisions and proper rulings in regards to anything. You understand? That's hikmah. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Rasulullah, here you see that Allah is saying that Allah himself, yu'allimuhu, Allah is teaching Isa alayhi salam how to have hikmah. In the ayat that I referred to about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, right? What is the reference here is that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam teaches his ummah what? Hikmah. So this ummah is taught through the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam how to use hikmah, meaning we should be people also that are taught how to come to proper conclusions. You understand what I'm saying? We are people, this is for a prophet directly from Allah. We are people whom Allah sent a messenger, minkum, in another ayah, or minhum, meaning from us, another human being. Allah sends a messenger to teach you you as a people, as an ummah, to teach you hikmah. That you should be the people who learn this hikmah from the Prophet of how to make proper rulings, proper judgments, and proper conclusions. Okay? That's why, according to one of the tabi'een, actually a very famous one, Zayd ibn Aslam, rahimahullah ta'ala. Does anyone remember that name? Maybe you come across it. Nobody? Zayd ibn Aslam. He was the freed slave of Umar. Now he said that this hikmah is al-aqlu fi din. It is to be, literally aql obviously is an intellect, right? It is, in other words, to be very logical and rational in regards to what? The deen. And that's related, of course, if hikmah means to make the right conclusions, how do you conclude things? Through what? The intellect. Is that true or not? You use the intellect to conclude something. So if hikmah means that, as he said, al-aqlu fi din, it means that what is taught to a person is the ability to rationalize and come to proper conclusions logically within the deen. Why would he say fi din? Why would he quantify it or qualify it here, rather, and say in the religion? Because people can be very intelligent, but they make the wrong decisions because they are what? They are not morally upright. And that's why in the other ayat that I referred to before even, what is يُعَلِّمُهُمْ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. No, excuse me. يُعَلِّمُهُمْ الْكِتَابَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. Now I have to go back. I'm getting these ayat confused. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا من أنفسهم يتلون عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة. In other words, the sequence here is at first يزكيهم, tazkiyah. Tazkiyatun nafs, which means what? Moral rectification. He rectifies them morally, and then he teaches them the book of Allah and wisdom, meaning not wisdom in reality, but what? Proper, al-aqlu fi din, proper, rational conclusions. Why? Because a person may be smart and may think rationally, but if they're not morally upright and they have moral integrity, then what will happen? They will allow their passions and desires to change or to alter or even sometimes influence their conclusions, where if you are taught morality and uprightness and integrity, then the conclusion will be followed, not your nafs and not your hawa. Do you understand what I'm saying? Does it make sense? So hikmah, you cannot come to a proper rational conclusion just using intellect alone. That's why I said al-aqlu fi din. That intellect is used, but it has to be used within the construct of what? Deen, meaning tazkiyah, meaning what? Meaning absolutely impeccable moral, how would I put it? Moral uprightness or whatever, I don't know. You understand? Absolute moral integrity. And the pinnacle of moral integrity, what is it? It's one of the qualities that we say is absolutely necessary when we say that somebody is a prophet. Just like there's certain necessary qualities for Allah. Allah has no beginning, Allah has no end, Allah has knowledge. These are necessary qualities of Allah. There are certain qualities which are necessary when we say that somebody or someone is a prophet. In many cases in the Quran as well, the prophets always repeat the same thing that's common between them, even if they have differences. Inni lakum nasihun, what's the second word? Ameen. Ameen. Ameen, meaning truthfulness, trustworthiness. Moral integrity, the pinnacle of it is what? As sidq, to be truthful. You get what I'm saying? What's called also in other terms, adala. So when we say the Sahaba have adala, what do we mean by that?
You're just.
No. Adl is, but it doesn't mean, it means they are truthful. They can be relied upon. They won't do what? They will not do khiyana. They will not lie about the things that they are saying or the things that they are relating to us. That's what adala means. Really, literally means that they are trustworthy. They are, in other words of putting it to, when they say adala, meaning this narrator of hadith as an example, because that's where they use the term in the hadith sciences. This narrator has adala, means he is reliable, he or she, let's be fair, there were many women who narrated hadith too. This person in general. We'll become politically correct. There's no gender specification here. This person is what? Reliable. That's adalah. So the pinnacle of moral integrity is what? Truthfulness. Without that, can there be moral integrity? No. See, even amongst philosophers, like what's his name? Kant. So the essence of any society to be good is what? Truthfulness. If you have khiyana and you have a betrayal of trust in any group or any society, that society will never be able to function, even outside of religion. So truthfulness, again, is the pinnacle of moral integrity. So at the end of the day, this is the whole point. When you are able to be just, in that sense, truthful, and always truthful, no matter what happens. اعدلوا ولو بأنفسكم. Be just. See how it's already, in other words, what? Be truthful even if it is against your own selves, meaning even if it doesn't work in your favor. Even if by being truthful you will suffer, you still have to be what? Truthful and reliable. Hence, the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was always known, even before Nubuwwah, as what? As Sadiqul Amin. Khalas. So the pinnacle of moral integrity is that truthfulness. Okay? If you are taught this truthfulness and this veracity, that's why the Sahaba were like that, because even as a culture, the Arabs of Jahiliyyah had a lot of bad habits. But one thing they did have that was to their favor is that they were a truthful people. They abhorred lies. And they would correct anyone if they saw them lying. That's why Abu Sufyan, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, because he took shahada, he is a sahabi, but when he was still an ardent enemy of Islam, and he was asked about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what did he say? He said, I would have lied if it was not for the fact that other people were around me, meaning other Arabs. And if the other Arabs heard me lying, I would have lost all my respect and no one would have ever allowed me to lead them anymore. So even the mushrikun and the Jahiliyyah Arabs had this one virtue of morality. That's why Allah chose the last prophet amongst them, was what? Truthfulness. That if people may have many bad habits, but if they're honest and they're truthful, they're the right people for this, which is what? Being taught hikmah. Because when they come to a conclusion, they won't base their conclusions on anything but what is right, even if it goes against their own what? Their own desires, their own self-interest, so forth and so on. If a people are not morally integral and they're not truthful, what will happen when they find out the conclusion is not working in their favor? What does every defense lawyer do? Right? If the decision is not going in your favor, we're going to have to twist a couple things here and there. Right? We're not going to be honest about it because then it's not going to work in our favor.
So then that goes towards the veracity of like also passing that down as well to make sure that it's...
Absolutely. It's integral. You can't have any information that's reliable, especially with us, with the Quran and the Nusus being textual, scriptural evidence. The Quran, Hadith, and even beyond that, even like the sayings of Sahaba, and even the books of fiqh and all of that, it always has to be traced through what? The reliability and the veracity of the people who are giving that information. Otherwise, it's to be disregarded. If their adala, meaning that in that case, if their reliability is in any way in question, even to the point that if you study hadith sciences in the way that the ulama used to, do these things, it's called jarh ta'dil, how they used to verify, or they used to vet, if you will, the information that came to them by vetting the people who relayed that information. They would sometimes use things that you and I may consider to be just insignificant. How would that make any difference in this person's veracity or truthfulness or adala? Things like literally one of the things that they would use sometimes to kind of lower the reliability of certain narrators was things like eating in public, eating in a restaurant. You can't use that nowadays because everybody eats in restaurants. Because in that time, in that place, in that context, eating in a restaurant had many implications. Many. One of the many too is like Sheikh Amin mentioned that too, is that if you're eating in a restaurant, the culture of Muslims in those days is that people knew their scholars, first of all. Because there's another famous hadith of the Prophet, Laysa minna, he's not from us who does what? La ya'rifu wa la they don't know their scholars. So traditionally the Muslim Ummah was always one where people of knowledge were known for the most part. especially amongst other scholars, even if the common person didn't know them. But especially other scholars, they would know each other. That's why they can even say that this narrator, that narrator, this time, that time and study, because they knew whom. It was like a culture, if you will, of you understand, of learning in academia, that everyone knew who's who. Even today, even in the Western culture, academia, people in certain sciences and certain subjects, they know who's who, right or wrong. So if you're eating alone, it means that nobody knows you. Why? Because the Muslims, by nature, if you come to their town or their city and you're known, would they let you eat alone? You see what I'm saying? So it means you're not known. Nobody knows who you are. That's why you're eating at those times are like the inns, the traveling inns, as they go, and you go there. And the other thing, two other things about it of character, that you're eating in front of people who may not have food. You see, all these things, they add up something so simple like eating in public. What would that mean? For them, that was enough. You can't be reliable because nobody knows you, and you don't have good character because you're eating in front of people who have no food and you're not even sharing it. You see what I'm saying? You're not even asking. Like, even if you go to Pakistan today, a poor family, if they're eating in front of you, what would they say? Come eat some roti or something. You know what I mean? Like, someone will try to share. This is inbred in the culture. So like, why is this person behaving like this? It's enough for them to say we can't rely on them. So something we would consider very small, but for these people, mashallah, would be such a big deal that that's enough. We don't have to rely on people who have that kind of character or display that kind of character. Obviously, now today the situation has changed, so we can't apply those rules anymore. You understand? If those rules we cannot apply, then there would be no reliability left, and nobody would be able to relay hadith or anything for that matter. Everyone would be thrown out the window, basically. But okay, that's just an idea of how important it was to verify the information by verifying the reliability of the people relaying that information. It's a cornerstone. It's called isnad also in this ummah. It is a cornerstone of our learning and our tradition. Without that, we really don't have much. Then it's just as Abdullah ibn Mubarak anhu said, وَلَوْ لَمْ isnad. If there is no such thing as this, isnad really means كَأَنَّهُمْ خُشُبٌ مُسَنَّدَةٌ. When you have support of something. Like right now, this is isnad. Me standing upright by the support of this chair is called isnad. So what does it mean when we relay a hadith, for instance, and you have to look at the narrators, because you are now seeking the, if you will, support. The veracity of this hadith is by doing what? I rely on, and the support that I have is the fact that the narrators, the isnad, in other words, I rely upon all of these people who are known for their integrity and known for these different things. They're my isnad. If it wasn't for that, as Abdullah ibn Mubarak said, if that didn't exist, right, then he said, قَالَ مَنْ, a person would say, مَا شَاءَ, basically people would just say whatever you want. You understand what I'm saying? People would be able to say whatever they want about the deen or about the Prophet ﷺ, and if you don't have something that supports your claim, the isnad, then what do you have? You have a mess and a joke. Basically, no one can be relied upon, and you don't really know what's going on. And we are blessed ummah because of that, because unfortunately the other ummahs lost their traditions because they don't have that. You understand? They don't have that. How do you verify? What is this really what Isa alayhi salam said? And if so, how do we verify that? What is your isnad? In other words, who can support your claim? You understand? Who can support this claim of yours that this is what Isa alayhi salam said? And when they say, well, we don't really have it, we just have to trust that God had inspired certain people, like King James, for instance, to translate it from who knows what. Did he translate it from Greek? Or did he translate it from Hebrew? You understand? Anyhow, you get the point.
That is amazing, though, that no other ummah has that.
Yes.
I mean, people were witnessing miracles from other, and no one had the wherewithal to. That transmission that we have is unprecedented in human history. I mean, it really is amazing.
That's why it's considered one of the miracles of the Ummah as well. People consider, some ulama say, this is one of the mu'jizat of the Prophet ﷺ. The mu'jizat of the Prophet are not just in his lifetime and among, it's also in his Ummah. That this preservation of, not even, and actually we can take it even beyond the sciences of hadith, even the Arabic language. The Arabic language, if it was left up to the normal course of human history, especially because before Before Islam, the pre-Islamic Jahiliyyah Arabs were very inclusive, right? So it was very easy to preserve the language. But historically speaking, when Islam spread, these Arabs also did what? They moved from Hijaz to Syria, to Central Asia, all the way to China, technically, and even all the way to what? To Spain. Not even just Africa, even what? Spain. And those Arabs intermarried. They even, if you look historically, even some of the earlier khulafa, like Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, it's said that he used to make a lot of mistakes when he spoke Arabic because his mother was Persian. And when he spoke, there's like actually stories, like jokes about it. Like he would make these mistakes and other Arabs would just laugh at him. Like, what did he just say? You know, like because his mother was actually Persian. His mother was not an Arab, and he was raised more by his mother than his father, and his Arabic was poor. And even amongst the poets, like the Shu'ara, which is the Arab's pride, even according to academians, like, the scholars of out of the Arabic language, in Arabic, they divide they call the tabaqat, they divide the poets into different categories, who's the best, who's, of a lesser category in the strength of their language. And the ajib thing is, they say that the most eloquent, of all poets and of all Arabs is either right before the Prophet ﷺ's time. It's called the Sab'a Mu'allaqat. There's certain poems that are still recorded to this day that when he was alive, when he was born, and when he was growing up, those were like the, how do you put it, like the top 10 hits, right? They were actually hung on the Kaaba. These were like the number one winners of the whatever, all the Arabs at that time. And they say, Afsah al-Arab, the most eloquent and the most powerful of all Arabs in their language, was actually the Quraysh in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Meaning the time of the Prophet is when the Arabs were the most eloquent. Hence also why the Quran was revealed to whom? Them first. Because their Arabic was the best, and when they heard it, they understood that this was something different. Now, what they say is that the tabaqat, the level of the eloquence of those Arabs amongst the poets, the shu'ara, it started to decline directly after the Prophet ﷺ. See, so every subsequent generation after the Prophet, their Arabic became weaker and weaker. Do you understand? So the phenomenon is actually this, that today, see, modern day Arabs will never admit this to you and I if we're not Arab, because they're so proud of their Arab nationalism and everything, right? But today, the Arabic is getting so bad amongst common people that many, what they call lehja, colloquial Arabic, like Egyptian Arabic, it's almost becoming another language. I had a friend of mine who was studying Fusha, like the classical Arabic, that's the Quranic and the Arabic of the Quraysh and of the Prophet ﷺ. He spoke like that because that's how he was being trained. He was in a cab in Cairo and he spoke like that. And you know what the cabbie said when he was done? Sadaqallahu al-Adim. Because it's not their, they don't speak like that. And I've seen it before, like unless you have an educated Arab who actually studies, Arabic literature and poetry, or is an alim, a scholar who studies Quran and Hadith, you start speaking like that most of the time, to many Arabs, they actually feel almost uncomfortable. It's almost like you're being pretentious. Like nobody speaks like that anymore. Why are you using all these likay, and af'ala, kada, kada, and like, who's this guy? It's like if like a guy went in the street and spoke like Shakespeare to someone every day, going to, they're just like, why is this by being so pretentious, It's really changed a lot. But the miracle is this, despite that, in the lehja of the common Arab being changed, the dynamics of the Arabs, like that's why I meant even when they moved out and spread across the globe and intermarried, right? And even their ethnicity changed. Even Ibn Abidin is a very famous Hanafi jurist of Syria, whose book of fiqh is considered like a very indispensable work in Hanafi fiqh. He even mentioned as an example that in the old books of fiqh, they used to say that an Arab woman should only marry an Arab man. Why? Because lineage-wise, an Arab is known through their father. And if an Arab woman marries a non-Arab, then her Arab lineage will go out the window. And the Arabs were very proud of their lineage, right? But he said that ruling doesn't apply to us now. You know why? And this is an Arab. He's actually Sayyid, and he's living in Syria, in the Arab world at that time. We're talking about, what, 17th century? You know, this is... And at that time, he said, that doesn't apply now because half of the people we call Arabs today are not real Arabs. Do you understand what I'm saying? He's like, Arabic is only known through two things. Either you have a lineage that you can trace back. A real Arab, there are some still alive today, don't get me wrong, but a real Arab will be able to trace his Arabic lineage or her Arabic lineage all the way back to Qattan, or what they call like the original Arab tribes. They'll be able to do that. My tribe came from this, and all the way back we come from. But if they're mixed, I mean, it's happened, the phenomenon is there. Even I know Moroccan friends that after the colonialism, after the modern era, because Arabs used to have, how do their names go? Fulan, Ibn Fulan, Ibn Fulan, Ibn Fulan. Your lineage is mentioned. Have you ever noticed a lot of Arabs that you meet to now, there's no lineage there? It's, my name is Muhammad such and such, Al-Falahi, which is what? A farmer, meaning this is your occupation. Or I'm Iskandari, I'm from... And even culturally, they adopted the Western way of naming yourself after what? A place, or you know what I'm trying to say? That's what happened, as my Moroccan friend said. It used to be that the lineage was there. Now, and after a few generations in the hospitals, when you go there, you can't do that. You have to give them another. You can't say Muhammad ibn. You have to say, oh, okay, Muhammad, whatever, Muhammad Qasim. But it's not the lineage. You understand? You're just giving them a name, like in English, a first and a last name, which doesn't necessarily indicate your lineage. So even in that, the lineage was mixed. Even the names themselves became mixed, where they don't even know their lineage anymore. Like a lot of these, like because of that, even in the Arab world, you would have to actually go back, as my Moroccan friend, you would have to go back to a library somewhere and research your family and then find the lineage. You don't even know it yourself anymore, where that used to be the Arabs' pride. They could name all of their forefathers all the way back to Ibrahim alayhi salam, like bin, and now it's gone. That's even gone, culturally speaking. The language was changed, because that's also, frankly speaking, the dynamics of human language. How different is such a language like English, which is not that, it's a fairly new language. Beowulf, which is Old English, that was written around what? At the same time of Rasulullah, right? Roughly about, 1,000 years ago, if not that, which is not that long in terms of human history. How different is the language of Beowulf to modern English? It's almost like it's another language. It's like German practically, like it's so different, right? Because that's how human beings, when they travel, when they interact, it's just the nature of it. The miracle of what I'm trying to get to with all of that is, despite that the Arab world did change, the Arabs did change, and even the Arabic language began to gradually become weaker amongst the Arabs, but one thing was preserved, which is what? The sciences of Arabic, like Nahu, grammar, sarf, etymology, balagha, rhetoric, even tajweed. The fact that the letters themselves, we know exactly how Rasulullah pronounced Hamza, and Ayn, Not only do we know how he pronounced it, we even to the detail that we know what part it comes from. It comes from this part of your throat, this part of your throat. And we even know to the point that this letter, when you pronounce it, no air flows. Okay, like when you pronounce dal, technically a good way of knowing whether you pronounce it is it's a trick that you put your finger here. If you're pronouncing it correctly, you should not feel any air hitting your finger. Why? Because when you pronounce dal or ta, no air flows. Tell me that detail that we've just, can you say that with English or any other language? That when I pronounce this letter, and I'm not even Arab, and I know that that's what happens. When you say dal, this is what happens. Air stops, there's shidda, there's power in it, your voice also will flow or not flow, all these details. And nahwu, I'm not even Arab, and I know what a nasab, a fatha means, grammatically, what a dhamma means, what a kasra means. And even in terms of etymology, we talked about hikmah. Hikmah comes from hukm. Hukm, hakama yahkumu. Hakim, and I'm not even Arab. How did that happen? When the Arab world did change, the Arabic language, meaning spoken every day, it did change, but yet we see that the roots of Fusha, of the Arabic, of the Quraysh, of the Prophet ﷺ, of the Quran is preserved. Tell me, how did that happen? Is that not a miracle in itself? Because if it was left to human design, then the Arabic language also would have been what? Changed and lost. But it was preserved to such an extent that even non-Arabs can learn, understand, and speak proper Fusha Arabic In fact, one of the greatest grammarians of all time in Arabic, who wrote a book called Al-Kitab as-Sibawayh, was a Persian.
So Brother Dickinson, so I'm a little confused here. So you are saying that words are preserved, everything is preserved.
Right.
What about the meaning? How meaning could be preserved if the language has been changed?
That's
So
in the
actual thing
Nahnu
is meaning,
nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun. That's what I'm saying. Everything is included, not just hadith. The language itself, the words, the etymology, like sort all these things connected, and even what the meanings. But how are the meanings preserved? They're preserved through the understanding of the fuqaha and the ulama and the people who, you understand, from those generations who recorded, like the tafsir and all the things we're quoting, it is preserved in that way. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the context and how they're to be understood has to be understood. That's even why why would even like something like the Sab'a Mu'allaqat, the things like the 7 famous poets, their works, if you read them, frankly speaking, it's not like piety going on here. They're basically talking about being drunk and womenizers and fighting and killing people. That's the whole subject matter of their poems, excuse me. So it's not like you're reading pious stuff. Why did we keep that? Can you still buy that book today? It's part of their preservation. To understand the Arabic language, like if you read any Arabic to Arabic dictionary, Lisan al-Arabic, if they try to give you a proper meaning of the Arabic language, what would they do? They will refer to these poems. That in this poem, this person said this word this way and it meant this. So all of it was preserved basically through the ulama and different sciences in different ways. And so now we have that still extant to this day. Another part of it, not to sound, let's put it this way. And this was something I read recently while going over certain tafsir books earlier. There's also, and this I have to say with a grain of salt because this is a dangerous thing to say in front of some people, there's also a spiritual aspect of it. Like Allah Himself says, Fi sudur, that the proper meanings of these things will be kept and remembered where? Fi sudur. You understand what I'm saying? In the hearts of human beings. That the proper context of things and understanding hikmah. And why am I saying that? Look at this ayah. What is Allah saying? وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Allah directly, just as this is what they were trying to indicate through this, is kind of like a little more subtle. He created Isa alayhi salam without a father. The normal means of learning, writing, as the one explained, kitaba, or wisdom, right? How to use your mind intellectually and come up to rational decisions. The normal means is what? Having a teacher, correct? But what is the indication here? Just like Allah created Isa without a father, He also gave him knowledge directly without what? Without an intermediary. كَذَلِكَ اللَّهُ يَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ. Because Allah can create whatever He wants. So if Allah promised to keep this deen intact, He has done it in 2 ways. One way is the literal, like you said, the language is recorded in books. We have dictionaries. We have all of these subjects are there to us, extant to this day. No matter what people speak on the street, it's all there, right, in a book. And the other part of it is what? That not just in the book, but also in the hearts of men and women of this ummah, they will always be able to understand those subjects, those words even, properly. Hence also why the Prophet ﷺ said that this ummah will never agree upon what?
A mistake.
Right. That's an authentic hadith from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, which proves that the ummah will never agree on what? A mistake. Together, always collectively, the ummah, Allah Ta'ala will always inspire them, and actually to be fair, because obviously there can be corruption of the ummah like in the last days, what they're saying with that is the properly guided ulama. Understand? That they will always agree upon and understand this deen properly. That's another gift and mu'jiza of whom? This ummah. That they always will have some form of guidance. Sometimes the guidance becomes less and less. That's why Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah ta'ala said that, just like another many hadith, لَا تَزَالُ فِي أُمَّتِي طَائِفَةً. There will always be a group in my ummah that will understand the truth, right? But the ta'ifa doesn't have to be a large group. Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah ta'ala said sometimes it can only just be one person. But there always will be a person or people or some group, whether big or large, in this ummah, whom Allah Ta'ala will give the proper understanding of all of these things. Otherwise, of course, even if the book is there and you know grammar and you know like all of these things, you know Abu Fadl, you know who he was? He was the court Maulvi of Akbar.
Yeah.
He helped him create Deen Ilahi, which was a whole other religion, basically. He said he was so smart that he wrote a tafsir in Arabic without any nuqta. Meaning there was nothing to distinguish the fa from the qaf and the dad from the sad and the ta from the tha and the ba. He didn't put any nuqta. Which means what? Obviously his Arabic was what? Very good. He was very intelligent. But what good did that do him when he created a whole different religion? Right? Just for the sake of his king, to make it easy for Akbar to marry Hindu women, for instance, do this and do that. Like, hey, no worries, we'll give you all the fatwa you want. But he was a very, intelligent person. He could do that, right? So you can have all the information that you need. That's the means, right? You study books, you study Arabic grammar, you study Arabic metaphor, solve all these subjects, which you should do. I'm not trying to say that's not part of it. We should do those things. But in the end of the day, if you also are not guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who some people, as this ayah is saying, he taught directly Isa alayhi salam. Just like he created Isa alayhi salam without a father, he also gave Isa alayhi salam direct knowledge without the necessity of him doing what? Going to the rabbis or anyone else to learn this, that, and the other thing. You understand? So that also is the same thing. Just as Allah provides people physically, Allah Ta'ala also provides people what? Metaphysically. The beauty of our ummah is we try to combine both. We preserve the Quran physically by memorizing its letters and tajweed and then the Arabic language also and hadith and all these other things. We try to do it physically, but in addition to that, the blessing of this ummah also is the fact that Allah will always guide them to spiritually. Which is very important in the last days, because unfortunately one of the things that will happen in the last days too is many ulama unfortunately will go down paths they should not go. And what will be the way out for people is that you have to at a certain point have this moral integrity, so that if something is wrong, as the Prophet ﷺ said when he was asked what is sin and what is righteousness. Al-birru, right? Righteousness is that which you feel content with, and wal-ithmu, what is the definition of ithm according to the Prophet? Like sin, ma haka fi sadrik, that which literally haka means it revolves around, meaning something that will never settle in your heart. It'll always cause you some type of, what's the word I should use here? Like, you'll never feel comfortable with it. No matter how much you try to justify it or think about it, something is wrong. Ma haka fi sadrik wa karihta an yatali alayhi an-nas. Two things. It will never settle in your heart. You'll never feel comfortable with it. And also it's something that if other people were to find out about it, you would be very unhappy. Meaning you're embarrassed also. That, so at the end of the day, what is the Prophet saying? Sometimes things can be confusing to you. How do you judge it then? Look into your own heart. If it doesn't settle in your heart, you don't feel comfortable, because there's another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, what is the essence of truth? فَإِنَّ الصِّدْقَ تُؤْمَنِينَ. Sidq and truthfulness, what does it do? It causes you to feel tutmanina itminan. In order you say also what? Itminan. It doesn't matter what the subject is or what it is. If I hear something like a correct answer, or someone solves a problem even mathematically and they give you the right answer, how do you feel internally? Content. Itminan. Like, okay, that was right. Sahibate, right? Like that's, yeah. I feel good with that. What that person just said, I can deal with that. That sounds right. But when something is incorrect, what rayba, wal kadiba, rayba, the opposite, when untrue, falsehood will always make you feel uncomfortable. Like, that doesn't sound right. Correct? Something is up with that, right? Like I don't feel happy that answer, something's wrong here. You see? So that's what the Prophet's telling you. Sometimes when you come across situations that you don't really have all the knowledge available, but you look inside and you say to yourself, wait, what's going on with my own heart here when I hear these things? Does it settle? Does it make sense? Does it make me feel content that, okay, this is what I heard, it makes me feel okay, it makes me feel content, it makes sense to me, right? Not my nafs, but my heart, meaning, I can live with this. And I won't feel embarrassed either about telling other people about these things. You understand? Like other people, if I told them that, like even if you were to talk about a subject and make a mistake, how would you feel? embarrassed, right? Like I just said something and I was way off. So that is a mark of that thing being a falsehood. So basically what the Prophet ﷺ is telling us, that even without formal knowledge, you'll still be able to understand what's right and what's wrong by using the mi'yar of your heart. If it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't make you comfortable, if it doesn't sound like something that's palatable, more than likely it means that that thing is what? It's incorrect. So just leave it. Just as the Prophet said, even with the halal and the haram, al-halalu bayyin wal-haramu bayyin wa baynahuma shubahat. The halal is clear, haram is clear. In between these two things, there'll be many things that will cause you what? Doubt. You're not sure. I don't know. I don't feel right, right? So what should you do about those things, as the Prophet said? What should you do? Do them. Stay away from it. If you're doubtful about it, stay away from it. This is important guidance for us, like I said, in these days and age, because we have the outward learning. But the outward learning is not always enough. And when the outward learning doesn't always work for you, then you have to refer to what? The guidance that Allah will give you in a very simple way. مِن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبَهُ. Whoever believes in Allah, Allah will guide that heart. But, not to go to a disclaimer, that is also predicated on the most key ingredient that we mentioned before, moral integrity, which is what? Truthfulness. You first have to make sure that you yourself are a person of amana, truthfulness and moral integrity. That if something comes to your heart, it tells you that I don't know about this, but you're not a person who's honest, what will you say? Who cares? Say Bismillah and make Tawbah later, right? Who cares? Take what's right in front of you, worry about the results afterwards. A person of integrity will realize that something's wrong, and what would they say? No. So truthfulness is always paramount to all of this. Otherwise, if a person is not honest and a person is sneaky, you don't tell them, as the hadith, istafti qalbak, like, you know how people say that? Consult your heart and let your heart give the fatwa. But yeah, if you're a dishonest person and you're a cheat, you're never going to don't ever do that. In fact, the opposite. Whatever your heart tells you, you should do the opposite. If you're, you know what I mean? If you're not an honest person or an integral or morally integral person, you should probably do the opposite. Whatever your heart's telling you, don't do it. It's when you're a person of truthfulness and uprightness, that's when you can consult your heart. Right? Because you're willing to, again, if it goes against your desires or will or whatever it may be, you're willing to say, okay, I was wrong, or that's not right, or I don't feel good about this, and even if I want to do it, it doesn't matter, I'll stay away. Does it make sense? Okay, so then, of course, there's many things in these ayat. وَرَسُولًا إِلَىٰ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ. This is also repeated, as you know, in Surah Al-Saf, إِنِّي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ إِلَيْكُمْ, which is also repeated in the biblical version of Isa alayhi salam, that, O children of Israel, say not that I have been sent except to the lost sheep of the children of Israel. Why that is important is because it's very clear that Isa alayhi salam was not a universal prophet. He was not sent to Europeans, for instance. Okay, he was not sent to the Romans or the Greeks or any of these people who later on took Christianity as their religion, but he was sent specifically to whom? Bani Israel. All right. And then, of course, we have this. This is probably a longer topic too. What time is it? So just to make sure it's time to kind of wrap up, right? Sorry. The other part of the, obviously, these are very important too, because the other parts of these ayat refer to the mu'jizat of Isa alayhi salam, which, unlike other prophets, were very, very, if you will, supernatural. The mu'jizat of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also are very similar in this respect. There's a lot of things that are recorded, mutawatir, meaning hadith that reach such a level that they're undeniable, that would be equivalent to this, like water flowing out of his fingers and so forth and so on. But the greatest mu'jiza of Rasulullah at the end of the day was what? The Quran, which is a little more subtle than doing this. You know what I mean? Creating birds out of pottery and then going into it and it becomes a real bird, bringing people to life. Right? Being able to cure whom? The blind and the lepers. Akma and Abras. Because basically, what is this all indicating? Things that are outside of human capacity, even to this day. Can we cure the blind? Can we cure lepers? Have we been able, with all of our advancement in medicine and technology, have we been able to revive the dead? Right. So in other words, literally, like this was something that was so amazing in any time, in any place, so supernatural. It's like, who could do this? This is what happened. This is why maybe some ulama suggest that the miracles of the prophets are a little bit more subtle, because this is so extreme, if you put it that way, that some people even got it into their funny heads that what? Well, only God can do this. You understand? So you get it right. Like, that's how. But that's why, you know, that these things are not repeated later. You understand? Because we don't that kind of trap. We don't want people to fall into. Like, well, that's only something God can do. So this man must be that. And so that's why, you know, that's all that discussion is very important as well. And also, of course, you know, we have the important topic of who the Hawariyun, who were they, what does it actually mean, you know, how many of them were there, and so forth. The only reason why that's important, again, from this perspective, we'll leave it this, and then you can have questions if you want. If you look at the Christian tradition of how many people were there with Isa alayhi salam in his Last Supper, as they call it? 13. Judas being one of them, who later on, right, according to their version, betrayed Isa. 13 people, keep that in mind. Out of all those 13 people, which one of them are the so-called, let's put it this way, the relayers of the Injil? Isnadan, meaning if Islamically we were to look at all the narrators, which one of them were the narrators, or the ones who relayed, or, you know, gave us the Injil?
4.
Really? So Matthew, Luke, these guys, they were from the Hawariyun? No.
It's Paul.
Paul, definitely not Paul. Paul was the like my father's not even Muslim, and he's like the.
No, I mean, but he's the one who wrote.
Right, he's the
That's
innovator of modern day Christianity.
Right.
He's the problem. He's the beginning of all this nonsense. But Paul was definitely, so what you get what I'm inferring here, right?
Nobody was there yet.
Right.
Nobody was there to directly relate out of all these Hawariyun. As a matter of fact, according to Christian tradition, again, they were scattered throughout the Roman Empire, persecuted, some of them killed, fed to lions, even not even their generation, even after them. Others hid to escape persecution.
So Hazrat Yahya was not a disciple, like...
No, he was a prophet, but he was there to help Isa, no doubt.
Okay.
But he was also murdered. He
So
was
there's
shaheed.
like no connection between when they say John the Baptist and...
No, that's him. That's
him?
their
Okay.
name. John is here.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's the point.
What about Barnabas, though?
That's a different issue. And some historians, I mean, that's a different, because some historians, there's some controversy about that also. But if you look at it objectively, what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, just look at this simple fact. 13 people, according to their tradition, none of them are the authors or even the relayers of the gospel, right? Of any of them, any of the four. And on top of that, even according to their own versions of how things went down, they were all scattered, either killed or persecuted or went into hiding. Okay, now let's go to the Prophet ﷺ. Let's go to Muhammad ﷺ. According to some historians, how many people were there in Hajjat al-Wida?
100,000?
Yes, over 100,000. How many? 100,000 compared to 13. Okay? And we know the names of these people, and even they carbon dated, by the way, it was in Cambridge University, the copy of the Quran they have there, they carbon dated it, and it is from the time of Uthman radiallahu anhu. And so forth. In other words, 100,000 people from the time of the Prophet ﷺ relaying all the things that the Prophet taught in different capacities, right? Unbroken chain is that until now. Compared to 13 people who we don't even know whom all of them were. We don't know what happened to them. They were scattered across the world, hidden, persecuted, killed, or whatever happened to them. And then you have 100,000 people. Just from that fact alone, without getting all the nitty-gritty details, what would you say about the reliability of these two traditions? You understand? Which one is more reliable? Which one can we actually comfortably say that, yes, this is what this person taught, this is what this person, right, gave to us? 13 people that disappeared that we don't even know what happened to, or 100,000 people in which we have biographies and names and dates and birth and death and even who they married, who their children were, blah, all of that. Which one is more reliable? Yeah. May Allah give us the capacity to appreciate the real gift that we've been given, that this is in both ways, from a very practical, pragmatic, and very physical, tangible way, He has protected the deen, and also spiritually too, He has protected the deen. There is no greater ni'mah than that. So that's why al-yawma akmaltu lakum deenakum. Right? And what did He say? That this is a ni'mah. This is a blessing that I gave you, and I completed your deen, and you just have to basically ended this promise. Then you can ask a question if you need to. It's like this: if your father did hard work to become a millionaire, which is basically what these generations did for us, and then you inherit that millions and millions without doing any hard work. So what is your job then? You can't do the work that he did. He did it already. He worked hard for it. You inherited it. So now what do? You can't do his work that he already did. How do you show gratitude towards it, towards his effort and the money that you received from him, inherited from him?
Don't waste it.
Don't do what? Don't waste it. Appreciate the fact that somebody else gave it to you with all that hard work so that you can do what? Protect it, use it wisely, invest it wisely. In fact, invest it so wisely that hopefully your children too can do what? Can live off of it, and then those children and those, you understand? That's our duty. We can't do the work that the people did before us that's already done. Our duty is to appreciate what Allah has done to us in this ni'mah, that He protected it through these generations and He gave it down to us. Don't sell it out, right? Don't abandon it. Don't turn your backs on it. Understand that this inheritance is a great legacy, and it is something to value, it is something to relish, and it's something to thank Allah for, and the way we thank Allah for it is don't waste it. Protect it. May Allah make it easy. Jazakumullah khairan kathira. Any questions?
So just one, talking about the miracles. So isn't it a divine rule that if a Qawm is asking for a miracle and Prophet says, if I give you miracle and you still don't believe, then there will be azab?
That's coming. So the ayah here says either ahassa Isa, right?
Yeah.
When Isa alayhi salam had that inclination that these people are going to reject me.
Yeah.
Okay, that's related to that.
But when Isa was giving obvious miracles,
Right,
and they still did not believe him,
right.
but there was no azab on Bani Israel.
It gets even more interesting because what does he say? In other ayats, that basically, فَأَصْبَحُوا ظَاهِرِينَ, the followers of Isa, they literally became what? Dominant. And as the ulama explained, you can only become dominant in two ways, either through actual physical fighting or through what? And through the intellectual, through debate. You've proven your point now, that actually didn't happen in the time of Isa alayhi salam. And Bani Israel was not punished, if you would put it that way, for their deliberate rejection of Isa alayhi salam. It's yet to happen. You get my point, huh? It is yet to happen. That honor too has been relegated to another ummah. And it's yet to happen. So that's the ajib thing, because the ayah, if you read it, eventually the followers, the Hawariyun, Nahnu Ansar Allah, right? This is if you go back to what? And other than the Surah Al-Saf.
Yeah.
فَأَصْبَحُوا ظَاهِرِينَ. So the followers of Isa will become dominant, but it didn't happen. So you get what I'm trying to say. It will happen, but it hasn't happened yet, which is also why there's other indications of this too. Sometimes to exonerate people, Allah Ta'ala doesn't have to do it right there and then in their lifetime. Sometimes some people will never be exonerated except on the day of Qiyamah. There's many prophets, their exoneration will come when? On the day of judgment, when this ummah will be called antum shuhada ala nas, as we are told, alright? They will be called to say, yes, Nuh alayhi salam spoke the truth. So it means that even in this world they will not be exonerated. It would be on the day of judgment that this ummah, subhanAllah, that's another topic. I mean, that really we don't appreciate who we are. This ummah will be asked to exonerate prophets. That yes, they spoke the truth. They did their job. You know what I mean? They had, and so it's like the honor that Allah gave to this ummah and all of these things. true followers of Isa will be these people. So therefore, in the future, the adab of these other people of rejecting him will come through the hands of also what? These people. فَأَصْبَحُوا ظَاهِرِينَ. You understand what I'm saying? May Allah make it easy for us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at least give us this much, that we have the appreciation for the great maqam and status that we have been given as the followers of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that Allah ta'ala has really literally given us everything we need. We're just not appreciating, don't squander the wealth, in other words. People go and take those millions and buy a sports car and drive it off a cliff, right? I inherited millions of dollars from my hardworking dad, and what do I do with it? I go bankrupt in a year. What am I talking about? Maybe not in a year, but Daddy gives me millions, and what do? I go bankrupt several times. That's not a smart thing to do. Don't do that. That's not gratefulness. Let's preserve it, be thankful to it, and ask Allah to help us to be of those people who preserve it. And eventually we will see those things come to pass. We will be the ones who uphold, right? Uphold adalah, uphold, right? Adl, uphold truthfulness and the shahada, shuhada, and all of these. Inshallah, bi'idhnillah. Ma'al afiyat, ma'al afiyat daima. May Allah also make it easy for us. We're very weak. Very weak. Anything else? Oh, mashallah. Jazakumullah khairah for coming.
Thanks for Zohar, so let's pray Zohar. Okay, bro?